welcome to the series Issues in World History 1, 20th Century, and today we will talk about Paris Peace Settlement and the League of Nations. And as all of us are aware that the First World War was one of the deadliest wars in the history of the world, and where we find that so many people lost their lives, as well as we find the destruction of property, and so many nations they participated in this war. It is also in a way known as the Great War, as we find that such kind of a destruction, where we find the Allied and the Axis powers, they came into conflict with each other in terms of various nations coming together and joining these two groups. And thereafter, when the war ended, we find that the Treaty of Versailles or the Paris Peace Settlement was signed between these powers, and thereafter we also see that League of Nations, one of the bodies, was also established as a result of the Paris Peace Settlement. So, we find that it was being debated that there was not any international body which could regulate the affairs at the international level, and it was because of this we find that World War took place. It is being argued in that context, but we find that despite having the League of Nations, the Second World War also took place in that sense. So, we will talk about the clauses of the Treaty of Versailles, as we call it, and how the Treaty of Versailles in a way wanted to treat Germany or treated Germany in such a manner that Germany felt alienated, it felt insulted, and finally it also led to the Second World War. And the Paris Peace Settlement of the Treaty of Versailles is also referred in that sense that the way Germany was shabbily treated, it led to the Second World War. When we talk about the various kinds of clauses, we find that a number of territories, they were being taken away from Germany, and how Germany had to renounce its overseas possessions and the colonies to the League of Nations, and how the various places, for example, Saar Valley was to be under the control of the League of Nations, and France was provided with the exclusive rights of the exploitation of the coal mines of the valley, and they were being distributed among the Victorian powers as mandates of the League. So, we find that how the victorious powers, they wanted to take away the regions of the people, those who were defeated in this war, and they wanted to augment their own superiority, wanted to augment their own presence in these regions. We also see that apart from this, a number of other regions, they were also being taken away from Germany, and how Germany was in a way mistreated in that sense. And when we talk about the other clauses of the Treaty of Versailles, we find that how German Navy was restricted in that sense, and it was also asked that no conscription would be followed in Germany. Conscription was a compulsory military service which was to be rendered by the youth of that particular country or region, and we find that Germany was restricted in this sense as well, and the number of troops which Germany could maintain would not exceed 1 lakh was also being given in the clauses. So, in this way we find that the military might of Germany was in a way restricted by this treaty, and it was also being argued, it was also being given in the provisions that no tanks, armored cars, military aircraft or submarine was to be maintained by Germany when these kinds of restrictions they were being placed on it. We also see that some of the regions which were in a way beneficial to Germany, like Rhineland, was demilitarized, and no military forts and fortifications were to be maintained in that area by Germany. And we also see that such kind of restrictions they also continued in other regions, like the harbors of the island of Heligoland and Dune. They were to be demilitarized, and all fortifications they were also being demolished. So, we find that such kind of restrictions they were being placed on Germany, so that Germany is not able to increase its might, and we find that whatever excesses which were being committed by Germany during the First World War, they were to be regulated in a particular manner. We also see that how Germany was seen to be responsible for the losses which were incurred during the war, and how Germany was asked to pay the reparations, and it has also been argued that these reparations were astronomical in nature, and during the course they were also in a way moderated to such an extent that they come to the payable level for Germany. And apart from this, we also see that Germany and her allies, they were held responsible for the war, and Kaiser William II was the ruler of Germany, was proclaimed as a criminal. So this idea of war guilt was to be imposed on Germany, that Germany was responsible for the war. And we see that how over a period of time such kind of clauses, they were inimical to the interests of Germany, and the political clauses recognized the independence of Poland and Czechoslovakia and denied Germany to revive her union with Austria. That was one. And we also see that the German territory west of Rhine, together with the bridgehead, was to be under the control of Allied forces for the duration of 15 years. And if Germany was faithful in her commitments, bridgehead at Cologne was to be evacuated after 5 years, that at Koblenz after 10 years, and that at Mainz after 15 years. So these were the political clauses which were written in the agreement which Germany had to follow. And we also find that the idea of creation of the League of Nations, which was there, so is a body which could play an important role in terms of maintaining the international peace, was also a part of the Treaty of Versailles, and a permanent court of international justice was to be set up at Hague. And we find that how the League of Nations, definitely it played its own part. Later on we find that it entered, it in a way tried to resolve a number of issues in terms of international context, and the various bodies of the League of Nations, they definitely tried to do their bit as well. And when we see these kinds of provisions which were imposed on Germany, which were not in the framework of in a way of a truce or a treaty, rather many of the historians, they argued that Germans, they were not consulted at all, and it was some sort of a dictated peace, and German representatives, they were being forced in a way to sign the treaty at the bayonet, and they were threatened with the invasion of their country if they did not sign. So such kind of an attitude of the victorious powers in a way proved to be lethal in the long run, when we find that Germany was not ready to in a way follow the provisions of the treaty, and it felt that it had been humiliated and insulted. So it had to take back its honor which had been taken away during the First World War. And so such kind of ideas, they have been given by the historians, and Yeskar has argued that the Treaty of Versailles, the element of dictation was far more apparent than in any previous treaty, modern peace treaty of the modern times. So historians, they have also in a way acknowledged this idea where Germany was being dictated to follow the Treaty of Versailles, and others, they have also in a way argued that this particular treaty, it argued in the sense that to the victors belonged all the spoils of the war, and allies, they were the victors. And we see that the way war indemnity which was being imposed in Germany on Germany in the form of the reparations and the demilitarization and the disarmament clauses, all of them we find, including the war guilt clause and the forcible annexation of its territories, they in a way reflected the spirit of revenge. So this idea where Germany was to be held responsible for the war, and the kind of losses which were being suffered by the victorious powers during the war, and so Germany in a way was to in a way give back whatever was lost of the victorious powers. And so this in a way reflected the spirit of revenge of the allied powers, the victorious powers, that they wanted to in a way check Germany in every sense, and we find that scholars, they have also argued that this idea of war guilt was not realistic at all, and that Germany should accept that it was responsible for war. This acceptance of the war guilt was in a way totally unrealistic in that sense, and David Thompson says that a sense of moral responsibility could not be created by including a statement of it in a document which German representatives were compelled to sign. So, scholars like Thompson, they have argued that this thing cannot be written on a paper, because this was the idea of the moral responsibility, and which Germans, they had to accept or in a way feel it, then only it would be viable in that sense. So, it was not a viable or a realistic kind of an idea to include the war guilt clause in the treaty. And we find that, as I have told you, that the demand for the reparations or war indemnity was also very high, and it was to the tune of $6,600 million, which was an astronomical figure, and also when Germany was also in tatters, and the Allies, they decreased the amount to $2,000 million in the Young Plan in 1929, and J.M. Keynes, an economic advisor to the British delegation at the peace conference, suggested that same figure during the deliberations for treaty. But we find that the Allied powers, they were hell bent on in a way trying to teach Germany some kind of a lesson. So, this astronomical figure of $6,600 million was being asked from Germany, and we find that over a period of time Germany could only pay $1,000 million as reparation and stopped paying further installments as well. Because we find that it in a way argued that it was not possible for it to pay such kind of an amount, and the negation. We also find that in the Treaty of Versailles, the negation of the principle of self-determination and nationalism could also be seen, that how it gave the right to the people of the same nationality and culture to create independent and the separate states. And in cases of Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, these principles were followed, but we find that a large number of Germans of Posen and Western Prussia, they were left in Poland. And we also see that in Dalmatia, many Slavs, they were left under Italy. Thirdly, many Germans were left under Slavs in Bohemia, and the establishment of the Free City of Danzig, which had German majority under the League of Nations, was an evident violation of this particular principle. And the Allies, they also prohibited the union of Austria and Germany, and the creation of the minority problem plagued both European politics and caused trouble in future as well. So, we find that this kind of an idea could also be seen in the Treaty of Versailles, and we find that when you talk about the disarmament, whereas we find that it was also selective in nature. German army, navy and air force, they became the pale shadow of a former self, and Germany was feeling a lot of heartburn when none of the Allied powers, they exhibited desire to disarm themselves, even though the point number 4 of Wilson's 14 points mentioned that all round reduction of armaments should take place. But we find that Germany was forced to disarm, and on the other hand these other countries, they were not disarming themselves. And we also see that the German colonies in Africa, they were also unjustly appropriated by the Allied powers, and the Mendes system was being used as an instrument to seize the German colonies without really admitting that they were being annexed. So, a number of pleas, a number of ideas, they were being utilized to in a way weaken Germany in every sense, and mandate system was another kind of a system which wanted to weaken Germany, apart from the various kinds of clauses which were being imposed on Germany at that point of time. And we also see that many critics, they have pointed out that the seeds of the Second World War lay in the Treaty of Versailles, because the way the Treaty of Versailles treated Germany was very harsh in that sense, and the behavior of the Allies, particularly France, they destroyed all the chances of republican regime in Germany. And it also in a way facilitated the rise of Hitler to power, who used such kind of passion to arouse the passion of the people and support in his favor, because the excesses which were being committed by the Allied powers on Germany in the Treaty of Versailles, they were being used by Hitler during that time, and the issue of German pride, German valor, it was being raised by him, that how Germans, they were a superior race, how they were from the Aryan stock, and how they had to seek some kind of redemption, the kind of insult which were heaped on them during the First World War and thereafter in the Treaty of Versailles. So, their lost prestige has to be in a way won. This is how Hitler talked about at that point of time. So, the critics, they have in a way tried to see situation in this particular context as well, and we find that the way Germany was being treated during this in the Treaty of Versailles, then we find that it was not a conference, but it was a tribunal in that sense. And in spite of the claims of Clemenceau that the conference called in all parties interested and all those who had anything to say were heard, treaty appeared to be an imposed one, and how Germans, they were being excluded at every stage, including the drafting one, and how the rebuttal of their objections and the threat of invasion if they do not sign gave it an appearance of a tribunal. And we see that some historians, they talked about the treatment of Germany was not unduly harsh. Her loss of the territorial possessions in Versailles Treaty was little compared with changes which a German triumph would have brought. So, scholars, they have also argued that Germany, if it would have won, then it would have treated the other nations in a very harsh manner. So, the kind of provisions which were in a way could be seen in the Treaty of Versailles, they were not harsh on Germany, rather they were being lenient on Germany, but it is some kind of an afterthought as well, because this actually did not happen, but they have argued that how Hitler, how during this particular period, sorry, not Hitler, rather we see that during this particular period when we find that the way Germany in a way treated the other nations when it imposed treaties. So, in that sense we have to in a way realize the importance of Treaty of Versailles in the framework of being responsible for the Second World War. And we have argued that in that sense that some of the German scholars like Fischer as well, who has argued in the framework that the German war aims were control over Courland, Livonia, Estonia, Lithuania and Poland in Eastern Europe, and over Romania, Turkey and Bulgaria and Balkans, economic supremacy over Belgium, France and Holland, hegemony over entire Eastern Mediterranean, unification with Austria and establishment of a Greater Germany, control over a dismantled Russia. So, these were some kind of the objectives of Germany at that point of time, as has been argued by Fischer. And he and the other scholars, they have also argued that when you try to compare it with other allies, that how allies exhibited considerable restraint in liberating only those ethnic minorities who had clearly suffered from their inclusion in German Reich, and the war indemnity and reparations were a natural recourse to large scale losses suffered by the allies, and the German industries witnessed no destruction as Rhineland and Ruhr never saw allied operations. So, they were the kind of arguments which were given by some of the scholars for the kind of treaty and the provisions which were part of this particular treaty. And it has not been established conclusively that the Treaty of Versailles devastated Germany in the process of compensating Belgium and France, and it is suggested that Germany could not pay reparation amount because she did not have any such intention. So, this non-payment of reparations was being seen in the framework of Germany not wanting to pay the reparations, and instead of a general increase in taxation, she resorted to reckless printing of paper money, thereby causing inflation, because that was the period we find that how Germans, they printed the paper money in in large numbers, and because of which we find that there were inflationary tendencies in Germany, and they were further compounded during the world economic crisis or this Wall Street crash, where we find that such kind of a situation became detrimental to the interests of the economy in every country. And when we talk about the Treaty of Versailles, then we have to see that how the way Treaty of Versailles has been seen by its critics or the people those who have tried to defend it. And we also have to see that when people from different nationalities, the representatives, they came together, then they had a lot of conflicting difficulties, and how they had complicated problems which were facing the complicated problems which were being faced by the peacemakers in Paris. And they had before them the treaties of Brest-Litovsk and Bucharest, which were imposed by Germany on the defeated powers, and the way they were being seen as harsh during that time, it was also being realized that if Germany would have been victorious, then it would have imposed similar harsh treaties on the defeated powers. And so such kind of contents which were there in these treaties, Bucharest and Brest-Litovsk, the peacemakers, they were definitely in a way affected by it, and we find that Treaty of Versailles definitely was one of the treaties which has been debated a lot among the scholars, for the matter that finally it is seen to be one of the reasons for the Second World War. And scholars, they have in a way argued that if Germany would have been treated in a better manner, then the Second World War would not happen. But these are the questions which are in the framework of the hypothetical questions, because not one reason was in a way important or relevant from for the initiation of the Second World War. A number of factors, they came together which provided the basis for the Second World War. And when the scholars, they have argued in the framework of the Treaty of Versailles, we find that their ideas are in the framework of seeing the Treaty of Versailles or the Paris Peace Settlement as being responsible for the Second World War. And when we tend to understand them in terms of the various clauses, we also realize that these clauses, whether the military or legal for that matter, all of them, political, economic, all of them, they were comparatively harsh on Germany, and it definitely hurt the German pride, and which was later utilized by Hitler in terms of arousing the passion of the masses in the framework of the Treaty of Versailles, that how Treaty of Versailles was a dictated kind of a treaty which overlooked the interests of Germany, and at the same time it wanted to teach a lesson to the German people. So, German people, they had this kind of a responsibility in that sense to reject the Treaty of Versailles. And Hitler, when he assumed power, we find that he in a way over a period of time rejected many of the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, and in terms of non-payment of the reparations for that matter, or we also see that the Rhineland was remilitarized by Germany, and how when Germany became the member of the League of Nations, later Germany withdrew from the League of Nations. So, we have to understand Treaty of Versailles or Paris Peace Settlement in this particular context, and we will talk further about the League of Nations in our next lecture. Thank you very much.